Welcome to the Answers Yes podcast, where we interview some of the most interesting people that have said yes to opportunities in their life. We hope that through these stories, you can learn to create your own destiny by saying yes along the way. Join us as we explore the new series covering topics such as passion, integrity, and hard work. I'm your host, Jim Riley, and I hope you enjoy these interviews as much as I do. I believe that everyone has an important message worth hearing. Hey, welcome back to the show. You know, I've mentioned his name for a while, but David Meltzer was a business coach of mine several years ago, and I learned so much from Dave, and I love following along what he's doing. And he's out there running the gamut. Of course, he's an author of a couple best-selling books. He's a business coach, and he is in the sports industry with some great athletes, great talent. He's always helping other people. And somebody that worked for him, Todd Armstrong, got in contact with me recently about some great podcast guests. And Todd and I go back a couple years now. He's been sending wonderful guests my way. And today is no different than that. He sent Andrew Kapp my way today. Good morning, Andrew.
Hey, Jim. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to talk to you.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, I put out a book last year. It wasn't last year. It's only been about 5 months. Time seems to fly. But, you know, it's one thing to put out a book, but it's another to actually sell some copies. And, you know, I see the words behind you. Three words I use to sell 100,000 books. I'm thinking, that's a lot of books.
You know, it's funny because like everything's relative. Obviously, it feels like a lot. The goal is over 1 million. So it's one of those things where even though the goal's 1 million, I don't look at the score every single day and get down on myself. I just like plug away every single day. Actually, you know, one of the things I say in that book, it's where every single day, whether it's big or small, I do something, at least one thing in service to the book, the different book that I actually sold 100,000 copies of. And the numbers come in whatever speed they come in, and I'm very at ease with it.
Yeah. Well, I want to unpack that a little bit, but let's get some background on you, what you did early in life and in business and how you got to where you're at today. And you can start anywhere, even if it was on the playground selling gum. So we like entrepreneurial stories and backgrounds.
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting because my first experience or first impression of like what it means to be an entrepreneur was when I was an aspiring cartoonist. And actually, I was an aspiring comic book artist. And it changed to cartoonist because I wasn't that good and I couldn't do it. But I had followed, you know, Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, some names that people would know if they understand like the comic industry because they founded Image Comics, the first legitimate competitor with Marvel and DC. And I followed Todd McFarlane in particular because he wasn't a comic artist. He was an entrepreneur who drew comics. And it was very interesting to watch how he operated. It was very interesting to hear the words that he used, the way, and this is me like a kid. It's not like, you know, I don't understand like these terms, but it's like he understood what his market was. He understood what his, you know, unique selling proposition, like he understood all these things. And he conveyed it in a way where whether, you know, someone was a teenager or a kid or an adult, he knew how to connect with his stuff. So he made a very strong impression on me. And, you know, within 1 year out of college, I was already starting my own business in our production studio, trying to get the comic strip into syndication, which did not work out. But it was actually a very funny, weird thing because I spent 4 years, actually more than 4 years, like, trying to get it together, beating my head against the wall, all the while picking up modalities, you know, personal development, self-help, whatever you want to call it, to which I was introduced to the law of attraction. And I hit this really hard wall in 2008 where I gave up that business or really lost that business and broke up or had been broken up by my girlfriend of 3 years all in one fell swoop. And I had this, you know, epiphany, simultaneous moment of indignation where I basically said, listen, that this law of attraction thing, whether you believe it or not, like it seemed to work whenever I did it. So I finally like went all in, and all in is just a fancy word of saying, let me actually do 5 or 10 minutes of these manifesting methods, visualization, gratitude, only not quit this time when things are starting to get good. And it was this really weird, amazing thing where like, you know, 2 weeks later, me and Mr. Broken Heart, I kind of felt better. 3 months later, I'm in a brand new relationship. 4 months later, I'm making way more money than I ever thought possible. 6 months later, my life's completely different. And basically, I had this experience with law of attraction, which cut to like 11 years later, I'm finally saying like, I want to do something new in my business. What is it about my life that I haven't spoken about before, that I haven't delved into, that I can be passionate and excited about? It's like, oh, law of attraction. But there's like 1,000 books out there. So again, learning from Todd McFarlane, you don't want to be just any other voice. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to do something, you've got to bring something unique to the conversation. And I basically had to give myself permission to bring something new to that law of attraction space, hence the title, the last law of attraction book you'll ever need to read, which what I did in that, which I hope is different from the law of attraction books and sold 100,000 copies. So I did something right. But, every law of attraction book worth its salt is going to explain the law of attraction in a user-friendly way. And every law of attraction book worth its salt is going to provide manifesting methods or techniques like visualization that are user-friendly. I did those, but I also injected the examination of our own human nature and my own human nature to answer the question of why do we, if we learn about law of attraction or anything that we're excited about, why do we learn about it? Why do we start doing it? Why do we start to get results? And why do we quit anyway?
Mm.
And I answered that for myself, and that in the book, along with how to stop stopping and quit quitting, which I finally learned the hard way myself. And I know that's a very long-winded answer, but it's been a whirlwind ever since. And I'm just kind of like holding on to the reins as tight as I can as I move forward with it.
Well, without giving away the book, I would love to unpack that a little bit because,
Mm-hmm.
I've said this on the last several shows. I'm re-listening to, I would say reading, but I'm listening to Think and Grow Rich, probably for the 10th time, right? And over the span of my life. Always been in business, always admired the book. And, it goes into, writing down your goals and visualization, all the things that you're talking about, law of attraction. And when I bought the audio version, there was a workbook. Listeners buy this too. So I bought the workbook and I started going through the workbook and I got halfway through. And, I saw immediate results because that's kind of the life that I live. And immediately it put me right straight in the track that I wanted to be in. But then you get, I got a little lazy. And, the other day I picked up the book. I'm like, damn, I haven't picked this up for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Why am I not doing that when it works, especially in this time, works so fast? Right?
Yeah, it's so, and I'm happy to give you my perspective on this. And it's one of the crucial points in the book. So there's loaded words. Um, God is a loaded word. Sex is a loaded word. Gratitude is a loaded word. Ego is a loaded word because everyone has their own definition of ego. So my definition of ego, the way I interpret it, is ego is that part of your mind that is only interested in one thing, and that's your survival. Meaning, regardless of where you are in your life, whether you have a good or bad financial situation, good or bad relationship, good or bad health, your ego is looking around right now. It's looking like it's thinking, okay, my person's alive right now. So what the thing I don't want to do is I don't want to risk the status quo of what might happen if the person changes, because someone out there might want to be rich and famous, but for all their ego, as I define it, knows when they become famous, they're going to get a stalker, and that's a threat to their survival. When they get rich, they're going to get family coming out of the woodwork trying to sue them for their home. That's a threat to their survival. So the ego is this part of your mind that loves you. It's a misguided attempt to protect you, but it's going to very strategically and very adeptly play on your fears, uncertainties, and doubts, and whatever else it needs to stop you from making that progress, simply because it doesn't know if your survivability rate is as good or better when you make those changes.
Interesting. I've got a client, high net worth individual, but intentionally he invests all his money to almost nil in his bank account because he likes to fight his way through and struggle his way through. And it's amazing. He's been a client for several years now. And so I basically go through the process with him, pays me to work with him as we go through this struggle process. It's been pretty interesting because sometimes we get a little scrappy when we know that it's going to get tough.
Yeah. And there's there's that term like addicted to your struggle. There's a familiarity there. So believe it or not, there's a comfort in that kind of discomfort because it's familiar. So it isn't about enjoying life in that kind of situation, although, he may, but a lot of people, like, they're so used to that. That's how they know how to operate. It's a very scary, freaky thing to even understand the concept. And people got to know this about themselves if they really want to make leaps. It's a very scary thing to kind of consider the reality where there is no struggle, where money just flows in effortlessly and they don't have to pull their hair out. They don't have to drive themselves crazy. They don't have to have stress. It's a very freaky term for people that are used to the other thing.
Mm-hmm. How do we give people the confidence to to understand, to even pick up the book, and say, you know what, I think this law of attraction might be for me. How do we get them to understand how important it can be for them?
Well, so it's interesting because there's a couple questions like how do we get them to pick up the book and how do we get them to understand how important it is?
Yeah.
Because in terms of understanding how important it is, only the person that chooses to pick up the book is going to understand. I'm kind of going under the assumption that they know it's important, but they're never going to really understand how important it is until they make the change. So what I'm interested in is setting up the conditions so that they actually get the results and they get out of their own way. Because once they have an easy process, whether it's 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever, of doing these methods and getting a result, that will fuel their enthusiasm and their understanding. Because my school of thought is if you want to meditate for an hour, you can, but you don't have to. You only need 5 minutes. I've designed manifesting methods in that book for you to do 5 minutes a day. That's all I ever do. And that's always going to be more than enough based on the evidence of my life and anyone that's kind of followed it. To answer the other question, how you get people to pick up the book, this actually delves in now to the new book, 3 Words I Used to Sell 100,000 Books, because one of the things that I preach in that book is when you want to title your book, this is about the title. This is about getting people to notice what you're doing. I think a lot of, no offense to any nonfiction authors out there. I mean, I'm one myself, but I think we don't realize when we're writing those books and we're putting things out, we're very interested and we really care about what our family thinks, what our friends think. We want to look good. So when you want to look good, you inadvertently you really care that your title is cool. But if you're a nonfiction author whose work helps someone solve a challenge or problem in their life or learn something, do something, or achieve something, more important than sounding cool is sounding useful. Or to put it another way, you want to say in the title, what's in it for the person if they pick up your book. I'm making a very bold statement that I have to back up, of course, in the book. Otherwise, I don't get 5-star reviews. The Last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read, which I, having studied Todd McFarlane and studied a lot of business, understand what I'm really saying there is, because I've been there, by the way, I walked in their shoes. I know what it's like to read book after book after book after book after book and get nowhere. This Last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read, if you want to spend even $4 for Kindle, if you give me a chance, then, and you're inspired or excited enough to do it, that changes the game. And by the way, a little extra piece, again, borrowing to the new book, I wrote the book as a copywriter because I used to do copywriting, which is another way of saying I was more interested in flow. I was interested that people could glide through the book and just ease through and never get bored, never get impatient, because if I get them through the whole book, I've gotten through all the material and content that I know will serve them. So I'm very intentional about what I'm doing with this book because I understand when I do all these things right, when I'm actually serving the reader, that's when things really come together. That's where the 5-star reviews come from. That's where recommendations come from. And most importantly, and I really mean this, that's where them actually getting what they want out of the book comes from, because when you deliver on that, everything else follows from there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I never really thought about that before. And I've got a lot of books in front of me from all my guests on the show, but some of them are hard to get through. You start reading, it's like, wow, this is going to be a tough one to get through. And you might care a lot about the author and the message, but like you suggested, to have a little flow to that thing, I might not ever get to the end if I don't have any flow.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't want to insult anyone because who knows, like I'm certainly not the best writer, but I do know that when I do write something, I don't view it as a book, I view it as an experience. I view it as a song with a chorus and a bridge. There's an ebb and a flow. There's a thing because again, I'm Todd McFarlane led me in the direction of learning about, sales, copywriting, things like that. I understand that, like, if you don't write that sales letter the right way, you don't make any money. And by that same token, when you think about it, the Last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read is technically, it's a 208-page sales letter. Although instead of selling them on buying something, it's selling them on what they can do with this content that they've already paid for.
I want to go back to something you said about the title of the book when people are writing something that they want to look cool for their friends and family. I think that's equally plays true or holds true in the content of the book, but to take that to the average individual, that might even hold true to the emails that we write and the letters that we write, the things that we do, because we place more value on what people might think of me than actually who we are, what our actual intent is.
Yeah, and a perfect example is what we will call SAT words. You want to sound knowledgeable. You want to sound intelligent. And by the way, depending on the person you're writing that email to, or even depending on who that book's for, that SAT word might actually be appropriate. It might actually send the message that you do speak their language. But in most cases, again, going back to copywriting, you want that 5th grade reading level.
Mm-hmm.
And like me, I resist the urge to sound intelligent in my books, because I know that brings me down a rabbit hole where they're not as easy to read.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, front of my mind is always about, listen, 3 words I use to sell 100,000 books. Okay, I use the word I know anyone picking this up is interested in selling 100,000 books. So it is my responsibility in every single chapter to not only give them useful content that they can model and implement, but to make it consumable, to make it comfortable, because part of the thing that you're doing with a book, part of what people have an implied expectation, even if they don't even realize, is that they will get through it, that they will enjoy it, and that it will be user-friendly, that they can use it. No one wants to read a textbook. And sometimes we do because we can't find anything else on the topic, so we grit our teeth. But if you can give someone something where it flows better than a novel, you're golden.
Yeah, nothing against 48 Laws of Power, but that one was a tough one to get through. A lot of content in that book.
Yeah, it's funny. And like, these are great. Like, it's a hard book for me to get through, Influence, which anyone that knows about Robert Cialdini, like, brilliant book. I struggled, and I still recommend people buy it, but get ready for a struggle, because it's a dry read, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, you mentioned something when we first started talking about spending at least a couple minutes a day or 5 minutes a day to get through the book, or writing the book, or the task, or the selling of the book. In your case, you want to sell 1 million copies. I'm a huge proponent for spending any amount per day on a project that you're aspiring to do, or it's going to get it further down the road, because, cumulatively over a period of time, all of a sudden, like, wow, I've got a lot of hours into this thing where actually it's something tangible. Can you talk about that a bit? Because I think it's important to reinforce that message.
Yeah, I'm gonna try not to sound too cliche here, but I think, I think of this meme, and I'll try to describe it, where there's 2 ladders, and one of the ladders is the steps between the ladder. There's huge. It's huge spaces between the steps, and there's a person at the bottom just desperately trying to reach the first rung on that ladder, and the ladder next to them, a hell of a lot more steps, and they're all bunched together, but the person climbing it is near the top. And it's one of those things where when we're starting to write a book, or we're starting a business, it feels so big to us. Whatever that end result is, it feels so far away. And when it feels far away and it feels big, it's easy to rationalize, you know what, I'll take the day off and I'll work even harder tomorrow. Or let me eat first, or let me get a drink of water first, or let me delay in some way, shape, or form, versus, you know what, I'm going to write a paragraph. And if it turns into a chapter, also, but if it doesn't, at least I did the paragraph. And by the way, I'm not even going to worry if that paragraph is well written. It's a first draft. I can massage it later. Mm-hmm. Let me just spit it out. I think a huge hack to success, a great ninja move, is using your own self-awareness and the BS that you throw at yourself, and finding a way to get out of your own way long enough to just do something incremental every single day. Because when you see the results, again, that will fuel your enthusiasm, that will fuel your momentum, and you'll move a lot faster. I wrote the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read in 9.5 weeks, and it's a 200-page book, because every single day I went at it.
Yeah, and you lived it. You knew the content.
Yeah.
Grant Cardone said something. I don't follow him that much, but something caught my ear. He said, every morning he gets up and he writes the biggest goal that he can imagine, and he says a 15-second exercise. And his point was, you don't have to figure out how you're going to make that or do that. You just need to write it down. Your mind will organically figure it out if you really mean it. And his example is, I'm going to make $15 million this year, right? I don't need to know how to do it right now, but I'm going to allow my mind to manifest that and work towards that organically. That really makes a lot of sense, because sometimes we want to be too perfect. We write down our goals or that paragraph or whatever that we strive on being too perfect, when, like you said, sometimes just spit it out, get it on paper. You can massage it later.
Yeah. And that quote reminds me, like the first personal development book I ever read was What to Say When You Talk to Yourself by Shad Helmstetter. And what he spoke about in that book is that your mind, your subconscious mind, is a powerful supercomputer that we still have not been able to replicate in any other way, shape, or form. It will sort things out if you let it. That's why people are in the shower and they get those great ideas, and people get inspired, little nudges to do things. Like brilliance is inside every single person, no matter how little or how much they've lived, no matter how much school they've gone through or not have gone through. There's a lot of brilliance, and everyone can figure things out in a way that if they only appreciate, they would go so much faster and so much further.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm not going to ask you what the 3 words are that you use to sell 100,000 books, but you obviously have a cover and a back page. What's on all the pages in between besides those 3 words?
Yeah, well, so here's the funny thing, and by the way, thank you for not asking, because like part of it's like part of the magic is in the reveal for it.
Yeah.
But here's the important thing. I tell people in the book, the 3 words themselves will probably not knock you over. They won't, like, because the whole point of the book is like, let me tell you the 3 words, but now let me show you how I use them.
Mm-hmm.
Let me show you how I leverage them. So what the book is, mostly organic marketing. I mean, I'll mention a few pay things also, but basically it's me in the context of those words that I used personally to sell 100,000 books, where it comes into play of if you decide to do a YouTube channel, if you decide to go on podcast interviews, titling your book, putting a cover on your book, your subtitle, which people don't even understand. The subtitle has a lot of value, not only as an algorithm, but as a further selling point. A lot of people overlook that piece. A lot of people overlook what they can do on social media for free to put themselves in front of countless people in their niche to get things going. And I'll give this away real quick from the book. Like one thing that I did when I first launched my Law of Attraction book was I went to all these Facebook groups and I dropped value bomb on top of value bomb on top of value bomb, but I didn't say, by the way, here's my book. And it's not because I'm so great and everything, or I'm so noble. It's because I knew that if I did that, I'd get kicked out. But it's okay, because when I drop those knowledge bombs and those value bombs, if I did my job the way I was supposed to, people would be curious enough that they then click on my Facebook profile. And that's where I had the freedom to put, like, in the banner, here's the book and here are the 5-star reviews. So just by giving that value forward, I'm positioning myself and the book for success with the exact right people who would be served by it, because I seek out where they were hanging out.
I love when you said the 3 words aren't going to blow your socks off, because usually the most successful tools are the simplest of tools. And I think we spend our time convincing people that, yes, it is that simple. When I owned a tequila company, we landed Landry's Restaurant Group, which is owned by Tillman Furtada, largest privately held restaurant group in America. And we landed, I don't know, a couple hundred of their restaurants with our product. And I remember people going, Jim, how did you do that? I said, you know what? It was offering them something and then following through on that and living up to our word. Yeah, but how did you do it? I said, no, literally, like we just followed through on our word, our pricing and what we offered and our ability to deliver and those things. Like that sounds too simple. I mean, really, what was the secret? And you just throw your hands up in the air. Like people have forgotten the simplicity of transaction and really the honesty of what even 3 words could be if you follow through on them.
Yeah. And the thing about it is I love simplicity also. And I think, we tend to overcomplicate things. We as people, we as humans, but the real rock stars find a way to simplify things. They find a way to streamline in the midst of, there's always going to be nuance. There's going to be complication. There's going to be complexity. But within that, when people find a way of keeping it simple and just, I mean, in the end for baseball, you want to hit the ball, keep your eye on the ball. And it sounds so ridiculous, but I was watching an interview because Derek Jeter's, his ESPN documentary was out recently. So I saw an old clip on YouTube because now it's in my algorithm and all this stuff. And he mentioned, I saw a thing on ESPN. He only looked for one pitch, fastball. And I think Pete Rose also used to do that, or there's another batter, because their mindset was if they're looking for the fastball and something else slower comes, they can adjust to it, versus looking for another type of pitch, and then the fastball would blow by them. They looked for one pitch, kept their eye on the ball, and that's where the success came from.
I love that. All right. Well, we've got 2 books out. The Last Law of Attraction, book you'll ever need to read, and then 3 words I used to sell 100,000 books. Yeah, I typed in your website, went straight to the book on Amazon. I love it. It
Yeah, thank
doesn't
you.
get any
Yeah, it's
easier.
I make it easy. Like it's funny. Like there's a number of sites. Like if you go to and I probably didn't give you this one. If you go to awesomemarvelous.com,
Hmm.
that just forwards to easy links to the U.S. sites for the books. But anyone, obviously, if they're not on the U.S. sites or because I'm sure you have a worldwide audience, they can just search their local Amazon or Audible for any of those titles, and they're good to go.
Andrew, I've done a few interviews recently where my guests have just kind of given it out up front, in the first 5 minutes. And it feels like the rest of the interview is just us getting to know each other. And, I want to give nuggets to people. And literally, it's like, hey, the nuggets are right here. We could talk for another 2 hours, but the real nuggets are right here in the books that you've written. People just need to pick them up and put them to work.
Yeah, I would hope so. I appreciate that. And by the way, not to be too salesy, I priced the Kindle book in particular at only $4
Hmm.
because I mean, a book is a book and anyone can afford $20 or $12 for the audio. I like these to be accessible and easy for people. That way, even it's out there for people. And also that's why I go on these podcast interviews because I want to give free value. So if anyone doesn't want to buy the book, that's cool. I'm hoping this conversation served everybody. I'm hoping people can take these nuggets that you, by the way, very expertly guided me through and they can implement these and get success from there.
Well, I appreciate that. It just goes back to what you said a minute ago. Sometimes things are just so simple, you know. If you just follow that, my family and I, we worked for In-N-Out Burger for a long time, California chain. Most people know In-N-Out Burger around the world, but their motto is quality, cleanliness, friendliness. That's it. They've been around since 1948. 30,000 employees, worth over, probably $15 billion, privately held, and they've got a worldwide reputation since 1948. They only focus on a couple things,
I love that.
Simplicity
And
works.
if I mention one more quick point, because I used to hate if people would say, "Oh, this is and then that was it. Just so we're clear, at least from my perspective, simple isn't always easy.
Yeah.
But when you do the simple thing, it makes things easier than they would have been otherwise.
Yeah.
Because people, hey, you want to be in shape, like go to the gym consistently. That isn't necessarily easy, but it's simple. You follow that and you're good to go. So I understand anyone listening out there, not everything is easy, but a lot of things will become easy when you keep it simple.
I'm so glad you brought that up because there's a lot of truth in that. We're looking. I have a personal trainer because I run Spartan races, and he sends me my virtual workout, right? And a lot of times I'm looking at it going, this seems too easy, right? But what he's looking at is a 4-month map. Race days at the bottom, and I'm up here at the top starting, and he's mapped out what this puzzle looks like. And each day it seems to be simple, but when you put that whole puzzle together, all of a sudden you can earn some of the championships that I've had the opportunity to win because of his training and all those little simple things in between. And that's such a great point. Simple isn't always easy, right?
But it makes
you got to do it. You got to do it every day, a little bit every day.
And it sounds like you're pretty high level, but for someone that isn't high level, what a gift and favor to them that they don't see the whole 4-month plan because that'd be way too overwhelming versus being spoon fed whatever they have in front of them and getting through it and getting there.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Well, you've brought up some great points. Appreciate your time. The 25 minutes went by pretty fast.
Yeah, well, thank you again. I appreciate being on here. I appreciate the intentionality of your questions, and I also appreciate your audience. I hope I gave them some value today.
Well, I feel like it. I know that I'm going to pick up these books because I think there's value in them for me. And sometimes we think we're on the other side of the equation, but at the same time, every day is a great day to learn something. So I appreciate you and the work that you've done. So again, thank you for being on the show.
Nice. Thank you for having me, Jim. Real pleasure.
Thank you for listening to today's show. It is my pleasure and honor to interview all of the guests that have been on the Answer is Yes podcast. If you have enjoyed the show, please go on iTunes and subscribe, give a rating, or simply tell a friend about the show. We also believe in the message of our guests and the positive influence of their stories. As my own mentor and coach, David Meltzer, has taught me, spend some time every day thinking and writing about the things in your own life that you have more than enough of. You will find out how blessed we really are. Please visit my website, livelifedriven.com, for the latest updates about me and what I'm doing. Plus, I post a monthly blog about the many topics on this show. This podcast can also be found there. As I learned early on in life, what you believe is what you will achieve. Thanks, Mark Victor Hansen, and thank you, and have a great week.